I'm really tired from driving 12 straight hours, John McMullen. How are you?
12 hours. Wow. Yeah, I thought Pete was the driver.
I thought so too. I thought at one point, hey, you don't usually drive. Are you sure you don't? He did ask me like once or twice throughout the 12 hours. Once on the way there, once about 45 minutes left in the ride home. When my eyes were literally shut, he was like, I could drive if you want. That would have been helpful 4 hours ago.
How was the big game?
I'll tell you.
I didn't even get an invite.
The wrong team won.
I didn't even know you guys were going. I can talk hockey.
Hockey, yeah. Well, you've been in the press box at Heinz Field. The big story out there was really the radio broadcasters were miffed at the setup they had because unlike Philly, in Philly the radio broadcast booths are like 50-yard line. They're like in the middle of the field,
and the press is down toward I-95.
The press is more towards the 20s. Here, the radio booth was more like at the 20-yard line into the end zone, and the media booth is like from 20 to 20. So the radio broadcasters, they couldn't see anything. They were just making things up.
Well, there's one thing I know about journalists, and it doesn't matter if you're a sports journalist or if you're in Washington, D.C., they're always going to find a way to complain. If it wasn't that, it was going to be something else.
They ran out of food in the press box, too.
There we go, food in the press
box. They ran out of the food. They ran out of the coffee.
I said, Pete, how was the hot dog? It was salty. I said, you're going to complain about a free hot dog? He says, yeah, I am.
The beauty, the media people are the only people in the world that will complain about free food.
Oh, the pretzel was salty too.
No, it wasn't. It had no salt on it at all.
It had this pretzel wasn't salty.
The pretzel looked like it was bathed in some Auntie Anne's bad dream, but no salt.
It's the NHL, guys. It's not the NFL.
Actually, that was
at that top level.
That was the problem there, John, is that the NHL, they were just renters, and the people that runs Heinz Field, they were the tenants, and you had two people and two opposing forces that don't normally work together. And let me tell you something, they were unprepared for what was coming in with that.
My favorite moment of the whole eating experience was you went through the line the first time, and they didn't have, like, everything out, so everybody went back. So everyone's kind of sitting conversing around the table, so I went back for a second spin, and I saw that they had chicken parm. So I came back with a small little piece of chicken parm because I had already had a lot of stuff. Pete saw that chicken parm on my plate, and he got up and flew to that thing. He came back with the two biggest pieces. He was like, what? There's chicken parm over there, and I missed it.
Well, you already know that I skipped the whole salad part. So, like, the first 7 offerings that are salad dressing, some little tomatoes, some other vegetables, I'm floating by all those.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Philadelphia, and Pete will know this, the Flyers are tremendous when it comes to their press box and food, whereas the Sixers, not so much. And it's interesting, obviously. At one time, they were owned by the same people, and it was still that way. And you would have, the glory of the Flyers, you get everything from M&Ms on down to anything. And in the Sixers, you're fighting for 3 kernels of popcorn. So it's always interesting.
I asked Pete, I said, do you think they're going to have gummy bears here? Because that's like my favorite thing that the Flyers put out. By the way, you ever been to Permane Brothers in Pittsburgh?
Oh, boy.
I have. I'm not a yinzer, but I have been there.
And do you get you like everything that's on it, the coleslaw, the tomato, the whole 9 yards? Do you get onions on it?
I don't eat onions either. I would have said no onions on mine.
Yeah, I'm not a big onions person myself, but I do try to go native and try to do what they like at least once, but I probably don't go a second time. So it's more about going to the actual place than getting the actual thing. Sort of as I imagine people do in Philadelphia. Everybody's got to go to Geno's or Pat's, and if you ask locals, that's not where they're going to go to get a cheesesteak.
But don't you remember, John, the presidential candidate that went to Geno's and asked for Swiss on his cheesesteak?
And he was John Kerry, wasn't it?
Right, and he was roundly criticized for that. Now, what do you think would have happened if Mike and I went to Primanti Brothers or Primanti Brothers and Pete Thompson said, I'll take such and such sandwich, but by the way, can I have no coleslaw on it at all? Heads would turn like, who's this alien amongst us?
Yeah, and considering you guys obviously at a higher level than the former Secretary of State, so it would have been noticed more, I think, as well.
I have a hunch, John, that somebody has gone in there on a pretty frequent basis and said, "Look, no slaw on my sandwich." I'm pretty sure they're pretty used to hearing that request. That's just a hunch. I'm not sure, but I can't verify that. But I'm pretty sure that they've had that wild request in the past of, "Hey, I don't go coleslaw on my sandwich."
Yeah. Hey, I'm always on the camp to get what you want, get what you like.
Yeah, man.
But you're definitely going to get some looks if you're, running for president and you don't go with the cheese whiz. Unfortunately, that's one of the
Not to mention,
one of the problems.
I think the people that work at the sandwich places in the Philadelphia area, they're not like the friendliest people sometimes. So when you make a mistake or order something there, they tend to embarrass you. I think people in these other locations are used to people saying, "Hey, I'll take my sandwich a little differently." I don't think they're going to be so.
You're helping my argument there, though. If you spend a lifetime watching other people get embarrassed or almost soup Nazi'd if you don't order correctly, do you think that I'm going to stick my neck out there, knowing me, knowing the way you know me? No.
I'm not concerned. If I said, "Look, I don't want coleslaw on my sandwich," I could care less whether that guy looks at me funny or not. I don't want coleslaw on my sandwich. I'm going to order, just like you at Burger King the other day. He orders a sandwich and says, "I don't want this, and this on it." I said, "You're at Burger King, for God's sake."
Actually, I order it plain with cheese.
And more importantly, I like how Pete used soup Nazi as an adjective. I love that.
All right, John, let's get into some of the NFL stuff here that is happening because there is some news today. One, Le'Veon Bell assigned the franchise tag by the Pittsburgh Steelers. K'Wan Short, also Chandler Jones. We got 3 franchise guys in the NFL now, but Bell at the top of that list, and you got Antonio Brown looking for a long-term deal. So any surprises that those guys, do you think that those teams are looking to lock those guys up long-term, or are they going to play on the franchise tag?
Well, I think everybody wants long-term from both sides of the perspective, from the teams and the players. Nobody ever wants that sort of 1 year short-term deal. I should never say never. There are certain guys. Darrelle Revis kind of made it famous of betting on himself year after year after year and making a lot of money that way. Kirk Cousins probably going to do that for the second consecutive year. But generally, people don't want the franchise tag placed on them, and teams don't really want to use it, but sometimes you have to. And we're down to the nitty-gritty. March 1st is the deadline, so March 2nd. So you have to protect yourself in these types of situations when you have players you want, and that's what you're seeing. And I thought this year would be more franchise tags than there normally are. We still have a little bit of time, and if some players are, again, Eric Berry comes to mind, Kansas City is certainly going to put the franchise tag on him, and I think you're going to continue to see it.
No, he said he'll sit out, right?
He said he does not want to play under the franchise tag again, but remember, you can put the tag on a player and keep negotiating for a while. So it doesn't necessarily mean
and you
that
can
he's
pull it
going
off.
to play.
And you can pull the
You
franchise
can pull it
off.
as the Washington Redskins did with Josh Norman. Or if you're a player, remember, if it's offered, you could sign it today if you wanted. If you're Chandler Jones, Le'Veon Bell, and you say, I want to make that much money, you could sign the offer today and stop negotiating, but that rarely happens as well.
The Browns look like they're not going to franchise Terrell Pryor. They have 48 hours still to make that decision, but it appears that they're not going to do that. Do you think that he will have a lot of suitors on the open market?
Yeah, I do. That's the thing. I mean, we constantly talk about this process. Edge rusher would be a good example today because Chandler Jones got franchised, and then you see Mario Addison got signed in Carolina. So everybody starts the process of looking at players and saying, using the Eagles as an example, looking at wide receivers. Alshon Jeffrey's probably not going to get franchised, but people will look at certain positions, certain players, and say, I'd love that guy. But if you're really, really good, like Chandler Jones, like Le'Veon Bell, you're not going to get to the open market. So if you do get to the open market, and even if you have some flaws as a player, Terrell Pryor certainly does, very, very raw as a wide receiver, but showed tremendous ability, you generally get overpaid if you're considered a top player at your particular position. So if he gets to free agency, yeah, he's going to get overpaid.
John, the Dallas Morning News has a report that the Cowboys, they expect to release Tony Romo, and that release will likely happen within the next 2 weeks. Will Tony Romo have a lot of suitors?
What a shock, huh? Jerry Jones is going to be forced to release Tony Romo. The hand-wringing over that was amazing to me. The Cowboys have no other option. They have no leverage.
Well, it's kind of like his Bobby Clark, though. Bobby Clark and Ed Snyder. There is a tough dynamic of when to let guys go.
Obviously they have a certain level of respect for each other. It's not about that, really. It's more about the people that said, well, maybe the Cowboys will keep Tony Romo. That part of it was absurd. They just can't do it. And unfortunately, when you have no leverage for a trade, you're not going to get anything in return. And that's the situation the Cowboys are in for them. And, yeah, when Tony Romo gets to the open market, even though we constantly talk about the age and the injuries, look, teams are desperate at that position in this league, and he's going to be at the top of virtually everyone's list, except for the teams that are completely rebuilding, like the Clevelands of the world or even the New York Jets, who need quarterbacks but probably want to go younger. If you think you can make the playoffs, if you think you could be a Super Bowl champion, certainly Denver, Kansas City, Houston, Tony Romo's at the top of your list. Even Buffalo, because they think he would turn them from, a fringe 8-8 team to making the playoffs, which they haven't done since the prior century. All of those organizations, he's going to be at the top of their list.
There are also reports out there, John McMullen with us, that the market for free agent Kenny Stills already in the $12 million a year range. Does that price the Eagles out of that free agent chase and competition?
Not necessarily. I hope it does. But and if you've been listening to the Sports Bash, I've been telling you, Kenny Stills is going to get paid a lot of money. And it's the same thing we just talked about with Terrell Pryor. If you're on the market, if you're considered a young ascending player, you're going to get overpaid. And that's the case with Kenny Stills. He checks all the boxes, except for the fact that, unlike Alshon Jeffrey, he's not really proven. People think he's got upside. He's certainly got the ability to be a deep threat. He's shown that much. But there's not the proven production, and that's where personnel people make their living, is to sort of speculate and try to figure these things out and look in their crystal balls. Unfortunately for the Eagles, who need a deep threat at wide receiver, Kenny Stills is one of those guys that a lot of teams have interest in. So if they want him, yeah, they're going to have to pay a lot of money. And to do that, obviously they're going to have to start taking care of their own business before March 9th. And some of the people we've talked about potentially being released, all that's going to happen before the start of the new league year.
I'll talk with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, also covers the NFL nationally for FanRag Sports NFL, and he writes about the 49ers. John Lynch, you think that the early returns have the 49ers moving in the right direction?
Yeah, it's real early. Obviously, the new league year hasn't even started. But if you're the San Francisco 49ers, you have perhaps the worst roster in football. they've been through consecutive years of Jim Tom Sulo and Chip Kelly. So it's sort of like not Dumb and Dumber, but worse and worser. And hey, they had to go start moving in the right direction, and they signed a couple players. Earl Mitchell was waived, released by the Miami Dolphins, so they didn't have to wait until March 9th to sign him. And they worked out a 4-year deal for pretty significant money. And also K'Wan Williams, who's a guy people don't remember, but he was shaping up to be a pretty good nickelback in Cleveland, and then all of a sudden had that issue with the Browns. They sort of clashed heads about his rehabilitating an ankle injury. He thought he was hurt. The Browns didn't. It blew up. He got released. And they went out and took out a flyer on him. And I think that's sort of a valuable potential player. So it's worth it for a team that's that bad to take a chance on a guy like that who you don't think much about, but all of a sudden could turn into a starter on their defense.
Hey, John, I see your buddy Tim McManus over at ESPN speculating that Jamaal Charles could be an option for the Eagles if he is released. Do you concur?
Well, the name is certainly going to intrigue people, obviously. The problem with Jamaal Charles is how much does he have left in the tank? If he's even close to the player he once was in Kansas City, yeah, I mean, you would be thrilled to bring him in here. He would be a difference maker on this team. The problem is we haven't seen that in really close to 2 years. So that's one we have to really, really weigh how much you're going to have to pay him, how much interest there is in other cities. But, I mean, that comes from the fact that the Eagles have a significant need at the running back position, like wide receiver. They can talk all they want about moving forward with Wendell Smallwood. Everybody knows they don't want to do that. So they're going to bring in somebody. And if Jamaal Charles is out there, yeah, I think they're going to do their due diligence. But that's one you got to be really, really careful on.
John McMullen with us here, NFL News and Notes. Of course, you look at the NFL landscape right now, and everybody's gearing up for the next couple of weeks here. And one guy, when you look at that should be pretty interesting. You look at this as a great free agent year. It doesn't look like there's a big name at the top of that class, especially with some of these guys getting franchised. But the kid Bouye out in Houston, you wonder if he's going to be a guy that will be at the top of a lot of teams' list on free agency.
Yeah, he's going to be at the top of everybody's list, and he should be, because when I talk about those boxes you have to check, he clicks them all, and it would be a perfect situation for the Eagles to bring in a player like that. Problem is they've been burned so much at that particular position. People are automatically going to speculate and bring up Byron Maxwell and Nnamdi Asomugha. I think they might be a little gun shy by offering significant money. And make no mistake, you're going to have to pay significant money to get A.J. Bouye, probably anywhere from $13 to $14 million a year. That's the kind of money he's going to get. And I think overall, when you look at it, if I had to rate the players in free agency, he would be number one overall of the guys who are actually going to get to free agency. If you saw him play in the playoffs, he's a true lockdown corner. He's very young. There's not a tremendous sample size because he wasn't a high draft pick. He sort of worked his way up. He's only started 19 games, but he was just locking people down, and it was impressive. And he would make the Eagles' defense so much better from a domino effect, because if you could bring in a lockdown corner, all of a sudden, if you re-sign Nolan Carroll, he's better. Jalen Mills is better. Because he doesn't have to be on the field as much. It would just have this domino effect throughout the defense. But hey, he's a high ticket item.
Yeah, I think, and I don't think a lot of people know who he is. They're not really aware of who he is, but that's why I wanted to kind of allow you to get it out there that if the Eagles are interested in that guy, you should be on board with that if you're a listener or a fan of the team, obviously.
Yeah, and people will find that out pretty quickly because he's going to have significant interest. And I'm very surprised that Houston's not going to tag him. They have significant depth at the cornerback position, and the problem is they have higher, Jonathan Joseph, Kevin Johnson, who's a first-round pick. So they have significant assets in that position. We talked about it here with Benny Logan. Sometimes it's really, really difficult to already be paying guys and then say, oh, we got to make Bouye the highest paid corner in football. Sometimes it's just a financial decision, and I think that's what's going on in Houston.
John McMullen, of course, every day with the NFL News and Notes. We'll do it again tomorrow. By the way, John McMullen, your favorite Bill Paxton role?
Well, I think it all started, and I think people forget this. Chet set the table. Weird science.
How about a nice, greasy pork sandwich served in a dirty ashtray?
He got killed by Arnold in the Terminator.
That's true, and I love Big Love. If you have HBO,
Big Love was going to be my answer. That's my favorite Bill Paxton role.
Yeah, you should watch that show. Very, very good show.
All right, John McMullen back again tomorrow with the latest on the NFL. Thanks, pal.
Hey, thanks, guys.